Hello, citizens! Evelyn, our Astra's trusty bodyguard, is almost here. As our first limited S-rank fire attacker, she's not quite as OP as Miyabi, though that's probably a good thing, and she definitely has her own charms. In this video, I'll go over her mechanics and rotations, how she feels to play on various teams, as well as a comparison between her and Soldier 11. I'll also go over my recommendations for her builds, my thoughts on whether she's worth pulling, and end with some in-depth combo tips. As usual, footage used in this video comes from the Creator Experience server, and there might be changes on release. Evelyn is all about chain attacks. She can trigger them herself, and it accounts for around half of her overall damage. Here's how it works. When Evelyn attacks, she fills up this gauge. You can convert each half of the gauge to 1 point of Burning Tether, or the entire gauge into 2 points, using Hold Basic or Hold Special. The conversion attacks themselves are not iframes unfortunately, and only give damage reduction. Once you get to 3 points, you can hold down Basic or Special again to consume the points and cast her chain attack. This is the exact same chain attack as the one she uses during enemy stun, with just slightly lower enemy interrupt levels. Evelyn's ultimate directly upgrades this gauge mechanic. After Evelyn casts her ultimate for the first time, not only does she stylishly take off her jacket for the remainder of combat, you also now always retain 1 point whenever you consume points for chain attacks. The ultimate itself also gives you 1 point, so before casting Evelyn's first ultimate, you need 1.5 gauges to reach 3 points before you can chain attack. After Evelyn's ultimate, the rotation becomes a lot smoother, and you can directly chain attack with just 2 more points from 1 full gauge. Evelyn's core passive is simple but strong. In Binding Seal, she gains a 25% crit rate buff, persisting for 10 seconds even after she leaves the mode. Binding Seal is the mode she enters after most of her attacks. Visually, it's represented by this string connecting her to the enemy, kind of like a leash. You pretty much have 100% uptime on this crit rate buff, since she's almost always in Binding Seal. Evelyn's additional ability is very easy to activate, and it increases her chain attack and ultimate damage bonus. If her crit rate is higher than 80%, then it further increases the damage multiplier on her chain and ultimate. This is one of the reasons why her chain and ultimate has such a huge damage share. I tried Evelyn on a lot of teams, and she feels pretty flexible in terms of team building. Evelyn, Lighter, and Astra will be her strongest team. Both Astra and Lighter's buffs are very good. However, I did find that having Astra was more important than having Lighter. Just Evelyn and Astra can pair well together with a lot of other supports and stunners. If you're missing both Astra and Lighter, you can still run a combination from any 2 of the following. Notably, Evelyn, Lucy, and Nicole were surprisingly fun and strong. Just remember to always take out Nicole before Evelyn's chain attacks and ultimates. Here's a chart showcasing some of the different clear times I had with Evelyn on the various teams, in the current Deadly Assault versus Pompeii, and on one of the Fire Week Shiyu stages. In terms of her power level, Evelyn feels pretty balanced. Compared to Miyabi, for instance, in both Deadly Assault and Shiyu, Miyabi with similar teams can clear Fire Weak sides just as quickly as Evelyn, which really goes to show how strong Miyabi is. Perhaps Void Hunters need to be a tier above the rest to be lore accurate. I also tested Soldier 11 versus Evelyn extensively. M0 S1 Evelyn feels anywhere from 30 to 50% better than M0 S1 Soldier 11. The range is large because there is a lot of variance depending on your teammates and the enemy types. Without her signature W engine, however, the difference will be a lot smaller. Evelyn's main advantages are that she has higher coefficients, she can group a lot more easily, and she has less of a reliance on specific teammates. Soldier 11 relies on both having a stunner, as well as ideally a mono fire team to consistently proc her 4-piece fire set effect. Evelyn doesn't need to go on 4-piece fire. I will go over my thoughts on my polling recommendations later in the video. In terms of her build, Evelyn's signature W engine is the best option for her by far. It gives 24% crit rate and 50% crit damage, but most importantly, it also lets her chain attacks and ultimates ignore up to 25% of the enemy's fire res. Since chain attacks and ultimates can account for around 70% of her damage, The additional res ignore is very strong for her. Here is a chart showcasing her W engine comparisons. I would say that her heavy reliance on her W engine is a downside. Another is that Evelyn doesn't seem to have a perfect disk drive set. While 4-piece fire looks strong on the surface, Evelyn already has a lot of built-in crit rate and can easily overcap with a crit rate W engine. You could make it work with heavily skilled crit damage rolls on 4-piece fire, but it'll be pretty difficult. Also, if you're not planning to play a team with at least 2 fire agents, then your uptime on the 4-piece fire will be very low. If you're planning to go for the W engine, I recommend putting Evelyn on 4-piece woodpecker plus 2-piece flex. Or honestly, I think you can just mix and match 3 2-piece sets with your best substats. I did look into the 4-piece pen set, but unfortunately it only buffs ultimate damage, which accounts for less than 20% of Evelyn's overall damage. The conditional attack percent buff also only procs after using her ultimate, so the uptime is low in combat. I wouldn't recommend this unless you have really good rolls and can kill bosses in one cycle, since the ultimate won't be up all the time. For her stat priority, you want to reach at least 80% crit rate in combat to proc her passive. 79% won't work. Since she gains 25% in combat, you'll need at least 55% on your stat page. Afterwards, you can focus on more crit damage, and attack percent. In terms of her skill levels, you'll want to max her chain and ultimate first, followed by special and then basic. The dodge and assist will be lower priority. Investment-wise, I definitely recommend her W engine first, over her Mindscapes. Evelyn's Mindscapes in general feel pretty underwhelming apart from her M6. Evelyn's M1 lets her quick start her ultimate, which is a nice quality of life. It also gives her 12% defense ignore. The defense ignore itself is not a huge damage increase, and while the earlier ultimate is nice to quick start her chain attacks, I don't think it's impactful enough. Evelyn's M2 increases her attack by 15% and also refunds half the gauge every 25 seconds. The M2 feels a bit underwhelming as the attack percent increase itself is not that much, and the gauge refund only refunds half the gauge every 25 seconds. While this does let you proc more chain attacks, the overall damage increase is also just not that big. Evelyn's M4 increases her crit damage by an extra 40%, which is a decent damage increase. Evelyn's M6 makes her an on-field beast. Every time she hits the enemy, she additionally executes a mini follow-up chain attack that deals around 1/5 of the damage of her normal chain attack. She can proc this 16 times, and the procs reset whenever she casts chain attacks or ultimates. If you're planning to pull for Evelyn, I recommend M0R1. I don't think you need to go for any of her Mindscapes unless you really like her. If you're on the fence about pulling for Evelyn, I'm honestly a bit torn myself. Evelyn looks really pretty, and she kind of reminds me a bit of Saber from Fate, who I really like. I think it might be her hairstyle from the side, or the bodyguard aesthetic. Evelyn is also our strongest fire DPS by quite a bit. Her team building is flexible, and her chain attacks are satisfying. However, she relies heavily on her W engine, lacks a perfect 4-piece set, and since her damage is backloaded, she's really not great at farming domains. Evelyn also takes chip damage easily, since her gauge conversion attacks, while giving you damage reduction, are not iframes, so she's not great for no-hit content. If you don't have Astra, I recommend pulling Astra first. If you only have one strong DPS, let's say Miyabi, then I think Evelyn and her W engine could be a good investment. If you already have a built Soldier 11 or Bernice, I would consider expanding your box to cover more attributes. ZZZ strongly incentivizes using the right attributes to fight. If Evelyn wasn't as dependent on her W engine, I would recommend her more. Keep in mind, in addition to Super Ambi and Trigger coming in 1.6, we also have these 2 Mockingbird characters potentially coming soon as well, so there's a lot to look forward to and potentially save up for. At the same time, remember why you're playing this game. If you really like Evelyn, how she looks, how she moves, or how she plays, then follow your heart. And if you're one of those who happen to like everyone, then it's time to M6 your wallet IRL first. I will end this video with some combo tips for Evelyn since I played her quite a bit. Evelyn has a 5-hit basic attack combo, the first 3 dealing physical damage, and the last 2 dealing fire damage. Her 5th basic is an iframe. In terms of filling up her gauge, one basic attack combo and one EX will each fill up half. However, instead of just basic attacking, I recommend using her normal special into basic combo to fill the gauge. This combo has a higher ceiling and is also more efficient at gauge building. Evelyn's normal special has two forms. Special 1 always activates if you press special while out of binding seal, even if you have her EX up. Evelyn will leash onto the enemy and enter binding seal. Special 2 activates if you press special during binding seal. Evelyn will tether enemies together, and if you don't press anything after, she will continue to activate an explosion that exits her out of binding seal. You'll never really want to trigger this explosion because it deals very little damage, and Evelyn also doesn't gain anything from exiting and re-entering binding seal. You'll pretty much always want to be in binding seal, and Evelyn even automatically uses her special 2 if you swap her off while she is in binding seal. So when you're casting special 2, you want to cancel the detonation part by pressing basic attack right after the special. This lets Evelyn launch into her third basic attack, which now even deals fire damage instead of physical damage. And then you can keep attacking until her basic 5. The main benefit to this combo is that special 2 lets her dodge enemy attacks and gain more gauge if you trigger a perfect dodge. The special 2 also helps you group. Unfortunately, unlike dodges, you cannot chain the special 2s together, and you also cannot cancel attacks mid-animation by pressing special. This is what it looks like in combat. Also, Evelyn's mechanic is a two-way conversion. Her attacks first fill up the gauge, and then you convert the gauge into burning tether points for her chain attack. One advantage to having both a gauge and a point system is that you can save up both for a burst window if you need to. So if you see you're close to stunning the enemy, you can save up 3 burning tether points as well as a full gauge, and then when you stun the enemy, you can proceed to unleash a total of 4 chain attacks during enemy stun. Remember to swap agents in between if you need to refresh any buffs, since she really wants all the buffs on her chain attacks. I think that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think of Evelyn and if you have any additional questions. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you on stream or in my next video.